Okay, grab your instruments, and we'll start this first one with an exercise where we are going to lift these three fingers. My bow is at the tip on the G string for violinist, C for viola, and I will talk in violin speak here. And we will release these three fingers, and this is just an exercise of trust. I'm going to watch what happens as I drop my bow onto the string. And all I'm doing is lifting these three fingers and allowing my bow to bounce on its own. And we're experiencing those two natural forces. Gravity pulling it down, the bow bouncing up. So try something now. Grip your bow extra hard, the way you shouldn't, and try to do that again. And you notice it's not working so well. Now, mechanically or physically make it go up and down. So I push down, I pull up, push down, pull up. And there's going to be a maximum amount of speed that you can do that with. But look how fast this is when I come back to lifting these fingers. Two natural forces, gravity and resiliency of the bow, is much faster. So we believe in nature to take its course and get ourselves out of the way. So if you go to the park and you're riding on the teeter-totter or the seesaw and you're going up and down, back and forth, there's this point in the middle. It's called the fulcrum, and it's the place where the seesaw is rotating around. And we need to figure out, as we do this trust exercise, this dropping, where is the fulcrum? Of course it's not here, but it's in my thumb. And between my thumb and my middle finger, which makes today's class is not about a bow hold class, but we need a good bow hold to do this. My thumb is the fulcrum. It's very much not in the middle of the bow, but the bow is weighted unevenly anyway. So a way to demonstrate this, if I should be able to do this. You see my bow bouncing, and if I do that with taking these three fingers off, and what you notice too is that the bow is bouncing underneath my first finger. If I were to push down with my arm and my first finger is in contact with the bow, I'm going to deaden the return of the bounce. And that's okay if I want that, but if I want the bow to bounce freely, I need to allow it to bounce around my thumb. Okay, so come back to this, and I'll just let you spend half a minute or so just experimenting with that bounce. And what I want you to watch is that there is an opening, not by lifting this finger, but by the bow bouncing away from it underneath your first finger. So now let's try this. Bounce, let your bow bounce 4 times and then catch it with your fingers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, catch. 1, 2, 3, 4, catch. It will help if you are in the upper half of the bow. It just bounces a little easier for this. 1, 2, 3, 4, catch. Then 3, 1, 2, 3, catch. 1, 2, 3, catch. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. Now, make sure you're catching with a bent pinky. Often we'll see this. That will cause problems down the road. We'll talk about that. So you have this release pinky that lands bent. Great. This was all vertical. It's not making any sound because it's just vertical. And that's a really important concept for our mind and our body to embrace and understand, but it's not at all helpful for sound. So now we need to bring in some horizontal to help with the sound. So this one, let's just experiment. We're not going to get precise of where we are on the bow. You can experiment on the D string, and we're going to just drop and glance, or drop and glide. It won't sound very good at first. We'll dial that in. And you're just experimenting with still. Release the pinky, let the tip drop. I release the pinky, but at the same time I move my elbow, somewhere in the middle of your bow. Experiment with that one. And begin to really concentrate on this feeling of pinky releasing, tip dropping, bow bouncing, pinky receiving or absorbing. So let's start with a really important one, which is how hard we're gripping the bow. Experiment by just holding your bow very, very lightly. Begin to release pressure on the bow until it slips through your fingers. And then just repeat that as you go down the bow. And you'll feel like your fingers are sweaty, they're sticky. And that unstickiness, when the bow cuts loose, be really sensitive to that release of the bow. See if you can now hold your bow do that again, just so you really get sensitive to the moment the bow breaks loose as you release your fingers, and it's sticky. It's like you just made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you have a little jelly on your fingers. That's what it feels like. It's sticky. See if you can hold your bow with that looseness as you do that exercise again. Have fun. Now this is what I mean by getting out of the way, because that can be a little bit scary. You feel like you're going to drop the bow. And getting out of the way is releasing your command, your physical command on the bow, and allowing gravity and the balance of the bow to do the work. Now we can use that as a reference point. And let's experiment. Do that with the metronome again, the same speed, but clearly in the wrong part of the bow. Intentionally do it too high, and then do it too low. And be extreme with that experimenting. And as you experiment, realize what that's doing to that very light, sticky bow grip. To be in the wrong part of the bow and to make the bow come up, or the wrong part of the bow down here and make the bow go down and come up, does that affect your squeezing of the bow? Does it get more if you're in the wrong part of the bow? Experiment with that. Keep it consistent at the same speed with the metronome. So the question of, these two questions of how hard am I gripping the bow and where I am in the bow are really connected. Very much so. If I'm as you're just experimenting, in the right part of the bow, then I have the least grippiness on my bow. I am efforting the least amount. Explore precisely where in the bow, and it comes down to the millimeter, and I'm not joking, of where you are in the bow, where your bow grip is lightest, and you're playing with a very even rhythm, and it's effortless, okay? So let's go faster. Keep going now. You can do 80, 90, 100, 110. When you get to 120, hang out there for a while, and then we'll do something before we go faster. Keep in mind that there will be a place for some of you where you want to work from the ground floor of the first exercise we did up until there. And anything above that, your body hasn't figured out yet, and so you're going to be over-efforting. And so it will be kind of difficult to pull it off, but go have fun, and you're not going to hurt yourself. And we're not ruining any music along the way. So feel free to experiment and have fun, but just know that these sequential exercises will help you get to that. So kind of be on the lookout for where your threshold is of where you need to work below those things, figure out those exercises, figure these things out, and then work through that. This can take a long time to develop. It can take a very short amount of time to develop, depending on how your body reacts to the instruction of getting out of the way. All right, so now you've got up to 120, maybe. Now go down to 60 again, and now we're going to do 16th notes. Same speed as 8th notes at 120, 4 notes per beat. Experiment with that at 60, playing 16th notes. So we've arrived at the 80 hump, this place where we have to get over. And what tends to start happening around 80 is the rhythm starts getting uneven. The sound it's not warm, it's not clean, and becomes this new thing. And this is all body mechanics and physics involved, but there is always this ratio between how much my shoulder's working and how much my wrist is working. And so these two springs need to talk to each other. If my shoulder works more, my wrist moves less. If my shoulder moves less, my wrist needs to move more. The faster I get, the more wrist I have. So I'll show you a kind of a slow build-up. Here's a slow spiccato. A flexible but not very active wrist. I'm going to speed it up and watch that change. So you notice my shoulder's still working, but my wrist is much more. So there's this long progression of this ratio between shoulder and wrist changing. And 80 tends to be this place where wrist gets more active. And I like to talk about a wrist that is active or reactive. It's always going to be reactive, otherwise there's stiffness in my arm. But I can kick with my wrist, and that's an active motion. So hang out at 80, and why don't you try 80, 85, 90, and see if you can experiment with left shoulder, more wrist.